Oh, hello there, and welcome back to the channel, To Be Like Christ. Hi everybody, and welcome back. In today's video, we are going to continue our study of Matthew, but we're only going to cover one verse. And I know what you may be thinking, like this guy's going to be 80 before we ever make it through the book if he goes this slow, and YouTube's not even going to be a thing. Well, maybe. The verse that we're looking at today is Matthew chapter 5, verse 42. Let's read it. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've sat in too many Bible classes or ever heard any sermons on this verse, then the way you probably hear it preached is by starting off telling the congregation all the reasons you don't have to apply this verse. Oh, well, you shouldn't give to somebody if they're just going to go use what you gave them for drugs or alcohol. Or, oh, you don't have to give to somebody if you know that you're going to be ripped off, or they're going to go waste your money, or that they stand here every single day and they just don't want to go get a job. And so exception after exception after exception for why this verse doesn't really apply to our lives. But that's not what I want to do in this video. I don't want to look at all the reasons we shouldn't apply this verse. I want to look at some reasons why we should apply this verse more often in the Christian life. If you live in a big city or work downtown, you probably experience people coming up to you and asking you for money quite often. I used to work downtown. You could almost never go out of the office without somebody asking you if you could give them food or money or whatever. And I have a tendency when I see a lot of those people, especially when they're young people, and that tendency is to think, go get a job. You're a deadbeat. You're just lazy and you don't want to go out and work, and so you're taking advantage of everybody else and ripping everybody off because you're too lazy to do what you should do. And so I usually don't give them anything. And I think to myself, I'm too wise to be ripped off by this guy. I'm too shrewd to be ripped off by this guy. He's not going to take advantage of me, and there's a bunch of other people like him, and I'm not going to give to the vast majority of them. The only problem that I see with my thought process is that I don't know if it's biblical. Think about the context, because remember, context is important. And if you remember from our last Bible study, in verses 39 through 41, Jesus is talking about people who do things to you unjustly, maybe even people who rip you off, and how you're supposed to treat those people. He says if somebody comes up and just smacks you on the face, turn to him the other cheek. Don't take revenge. Don't return evil for evil. Just bless them and go on. He says if somebody comes up to you and inconveniences you for their own sake, be inconvenienced. And then you know what? Bless them even further and go the second mile. Somebody comes to you and wants to sue you and take something that they have no right to, your tunic in this case. He says, just give it to them and then give them your cloak as well. In every single one of those instances, you're being ripped off. And especially in the one where someone's trying to take your clothing, you know you're being ripped off. And Jesus' response is, be gracious to those people anyway. And that brings us right down to verse 42. If somebody begs from you, give to them. And the precedent of the last three verses is that even if you know you're getting ripped off, be gracious to them anyway. And at this point, we're like, well, why, Jesus? Can you imagine the people who are sitting on the hill listening to this sermon? Like, why on earth should I be ripped off if I know this guy's a fraud? And that's a pretty good question, isn't it? Even in the 21st century, we're still asking the same question. And so for the rest of this video, I want to give you 3 reasons why we as Christians should do our best to apply this verse, even if that means that sometimes we get ripped off more often. Number 1 is really simple, and that's that this is what Jesus seems to be teaching. The second reason is that meeting someone's physical or emotional need is one of the best doors of opportunity for us then to show them Christ. So the idea is not just to meet a physical need, but then to go on to more important needs, the spiritual needs. And when we've given somebody money or food or our time, or we've taken the time to have a conversation to find out what the real underlying problems are, then that communicates to that person that we care about them, to which they may ask, well, why do you care about me? Why do you care about a homeless person or a poor person on the street? And that's a perfect segue into Jesus' care for us. The third reason comes from the idea that we may want to be careful before we trust our own wisdom. In my wisdom, I think to myself, I'm too wise to get ripped off by this person. This person is never going to appreciate what I give them. It's probably not going to turn their life around. They're probably not going to use it for anything good. They're just going to take it for granted. But here's my question. What if Jesus treated us the same way? What if Jesus took that idea and he ran with it, and he thought to himself while he's up in heaven, he says, I can go down to earth and I can die and I can give to these people just out of my grace, out of my mercy, out of my care and my love. But you know what? The vast majority of them probably are not going to appreciate it. They're not ever going to turn their life around. They're never going to be a follower of me. They're never going to be thankful for what I give them. So you know what? Because the vast majority won't, I'm not going to give to any of them. Where would that leave us then? We'd be in a pretty rough spot. No way to be reconciled to God. There would be no hope for eternal life. We would just be kind of lost in sin. But luckily for us, that isn't the bargain that Jesus made. He didn't think himself too wise to come here and to die for a bunch of people who would never appreciate it. In fact, in his wisdom, he chose that it was worth it to give and to be ripped off in many cases by many people to save just a few who would appreciate what he gave them. Now, let's take this back and apply it to our situation with the homeless. It's easy for us to look and to say, because the vast majority of these people will never appreciate what I'm going to give them, I'm not going to give to any. And I'm not going to take that opportunity that comes by giving to share the gospel with them and to open that door. Our attitude ought to be more like Jesus's, I think, and his attitude would be, I'm going to give to these people. And probably, maybe 99% of them will never appreciate. They'll take it for granted. They won't be thankful. They'll never turn their lives around. But you know, if I can save 1 out of 1,000, if I can show 1 out of 1,000 the good news of Christ, and his soul or her soul will be saved by me getting ripped off 999 times, is that worth it in the end? And the answer I think we would have to conclude is, yes, it would be. Because the worth of one soul is worth more than being ripped off 999 times, no matter how much that may have cost. All the work that it took to get to that one soul is worth it. We just have to keep our minds geared in terms of the value of souls rather than the value of dollars, and sometimes that's very hard. So in conclusion, I would also say just use Christian wisdom when applying this verse, right? We can't go through every conceivable circumstance of giving to someone who's asking you in one short video, but apply wisdom. Jesus would expect you to apply wisdom when giving to anybody, and that's not always money. Sometimes it's food, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's giving somebody a ride across town. But I think this is what I would encourage us to do. Apply this verse more often for the doors that it opens, and because if we did, I think we would all probably look a little bit more like Christ. Thanks for watching.